June 13, 1944. After midnight. Somewhere over occupied France. The German night fighter comes from below and behind. In the darkness, the Lancaster is only a shape against the sky, a heavy bomber, a moving target, a machine carrying fuel, ammunition, bombs, and 7 men who cannot see the hunter closing beneath them. To the German crew, it is a bomber. To the men inside, it is their whole world. The attack is sudden. Metal tears, engines scream, fire breaks open inside the aircraft. The night that had hidden them now becomes a trap around them. There is no ground to fall behind, no trench to crawl into, no wall to take cover behind, only altitude, smoke, burning fuel, and a damaged aircraft beginning to die in the dark. Inside the Lancaster, the world changes in seconds. The bomber is no longer simply a weapon. It is a narrow metal passage filled with heat, smoke, panic, and orders that must be obeyed before time runs out. The crew understands what fire means in an aircraft. Fire does not wait. Fire does not negotiate. Fire does not care about rank, nationality, courage, or friendship. It moves where it can move. It takes air. It takes space. It takes seconds. The order comes to abandon the aircraft. Every man knows what that means. Find the hatch. Move fast. Clip on. Jump into the night. Trust the parachute. Trust the darkness. Trust that the ground below is not worse than the fire behind him. For most men in that moment, survival becomes a direction. Forward. Toward the hatch. Toward the opening. Toward the last chance to live. Andrew Mynarski moves toward escape. He is the mid-upper gunner. A Canadian airman. A man inside a burning bomber that has become a death trap. He is close enough to survive. That matters. He is not already doomed. He is not trapped with no choice. The way out is still in front of him. Then he sees Pat Brophy, the rear gunner, his friend. Trapped in the rear turret, behind him, separated by the burning section of the aircraft. Brophy cannot simply follow the others. He cannot just move toward the hatch. He is stuck inside one of the loneliest positions in the bomber, at the far end of the aircraft, where the sky outside is black and the fire inside is coming closer. In that moment, the enemy has done what it came to do. The German night fighter has crippled the bomber. The aircraft is burning. The crew is abandoning. The machine is dying. By the brutal logic of war, every man should now fight for his own escape. But war does not control every human choice. Not completely. Not here. Not inside this burning Lancaster. Mynarski has the hatch in front of him. He has survival in front of him. He has the night in front of him. But his friend is behind him. And that is the whole story. The way out is in front. The trapped man is behind. The fire is between them. For a few seconds, Andrew Mynarski stands at the edge of the decision that will define his name. Not a decision made in comfort. Not a decision made after long reflection. A decision made inside heat, smoke, noise, fear, and a dying aircraft. He could go. He could live. No one would call him a coward for obeying the order to abandon a burning bomber. But Mynarski turns away from the hatch. He turns back toward Brophy. Back toward the fire. Back toward the rear turret. Back toward the friend who cannot escape. The German fighter has destroyed the bomber. But it has not destroyed what one man is willing to do for another. Most war hero stories are told after the smoke has cleared. After the reports are written. After the medals are awarded. After the names have been carved into memorials. By then, the moment can feel clean. Simple. Almost inevitable. But in real war, nothing is clean, and nothing is inevitable. Andrew Mynarski's story survives because one man lived to tell it. Pat Brophy. The rear gunner Mynarski tried to save. Without Brophy, the burning Lancaster might have become only another aircraft lost in the night. Another crew list. Another crash site. Another tragedy swallowed by the enormous air war over Europe. But Brophy survived, and because he survived, the world learned what Mynarski did inside the fire. That is why this story is different. It is not only a story about a bomber being shot down. It is not only a story about a German night fighter. It is not only a story about the Royal Canadian Air Force or Bomber Command. It is a story about a choice so human that it cuts through the machinery of war. A man had a chance to live. His friend did not. And he turned back. Mynarski was a Canadian airman, serving with number 419 Squadron, Royal Canadian Air Force. Brophy was the rear gunner. Their aircraft was an Avro Lancaster, a large, powerful bomber. But large does not mean safe. A Lancaster could carry destruction across occupied Europe. But inside, the men were still fragile. They sat in metal compartments, surrounded by fuel, ammunition, electrical systems, hydraulic lines, oxygen, and darkness. One enemy attack could turn the entire aircraft into a burning prison. On the night of June 12 to 13, 1944, their crew was part of a mission to Cambrai, France. The target was a railway yard, a place of tracks, movement, supply, and military importance in a war now raging after D-Day. But for this crew, the mission would not be remembered only by the target. It would be remembered by what happened after the aircraft was hit. This is the question that should hold the entire video together. What makes a man turn back? Not when he is safe, not when the danger is distant, not when there is time to think, but when the aircraft is burning, when the order is to abandon, when the hatch is close, when his own parachute may still save him. What makes him choose the other direction? The answer cannot be reduced to one word. Not courage alone, not friendship alone, not duty alone. It was all of them, compressed into seconds. It was training, instinct, loyalty, and the terrible refusal to leave a man trapped behind. He was not untouched by fear. That is what makes the act matter. Fear was there. Death was there. The way out was there. And he went back anyway. This video is not about making war look beautiful. It is about showing how, inside one of the ugliest places imaginable, a human choice became unforgettable. A German fighter created the fire. A Canadian airman created the memory. To understand Andrew Mynarski's choice, you have to understand the sky he was flying through. The night air war over Europe was not empty darkness. It was a battlefield. A battlefield without mud, trenches, trees, or walls. A battlefield measured in altitude, fuel, radar, searchlights, flak, and seconds. Germany understood Allied bombers. They were not symbols to the German defense system. They were targets. Bombers attacked railway yards, factories, ports, fuel systems, and military infrastructure. They crossed borders in the dark, carrying crews who knew that every mission could be their last. To the men on the ground, a bomber stream could mean destruction. To German night defenses, it meant a hunt. The Germans built a system to fight that hunt. Radar, searchlights, flak batteries, night fighters, controllers guiding aircraft through the darkness toward the bombers above, occupied Europe. The sky became layered with danger. Below, guns. Around, fighters. Inside the bomber, men waiting for warnings that might come too late. The enemy feared what bombers could do to the German war machine. But German night fighters gave that fear teeth. They turned the darkness into a hunting ground. A bomber crew might never see the fighter that killed them. The attack could come from below, from behind, from a blind angle. A few seconds of gunfire could destroy years of training, months of crew bonding, and every plan a young man had for after the war. Inside a Lancaster, courage did not look like a soldier charging across open ground. It looked like staying at your station while the sky tried to kill you, the pilot flying through darkness, the navigator holding the route. The bomb aimer watching for the target, the wireless operator listening, the gunners scanning blackness for the shape that might already be there, the engineer watching systems that could fail all at once. Every man depended on the others, every position mattered, and every position could become a coffin. That is what the German night fighter crew could not see. From outside, the Lancaster was one aircraft, one silhouette, one target. But inside it was a living chain of men, each with a name, each with a fear, each with a job, each hoping the next burst of fire would not find him. This is why the story is not simply about a bomber shot down. In the German night war system, shooting down a bomber was the expected result of a successful attack. But Mynarski's story begins after the enemy succeeds, after the aircraft is hit, after the fire starts, after the order to abandon is given. The enemy can destroy the machine, but it cannot decide what men inside the machine will do for one another. That is where this story leaves the air war of systems and enters the air war of one crew, one bomber, one trapped rear gunner, and one Canadian who had to choose between the hatch and the fire. Before Andrew Mynarski became a name attached to a medal, he was a young Canadian inside a machine built for danger. He came from Winnipeg, Manitoba, a city far from the skies over occupied France. Far from German night fighters, far from burning Lancasters, far from the moment that would make his name part of Canadian military memory. He enlisted in the Royal Canadian Air Force during the war and became an air gunner. That matters.
Because the gunner's war was a lonely war. A pilot had controls in his hands, a navigator had maps, a bomb aimer had the target below, but a gunner sat inside a turret, watching darkness for the shape that might kill everyone. Mynarski served as the mid-upper gunner. His position was above the aircraft, inside a turret that gave him a view across the night sky. He had to scan, wait, listen, stay alert through cold, vibration, engine noise, and fear. A gunner could spend long minutes seeing nothing. Then suddenly everything could happen at once. A flash, a shape, a burst of fire, a few seconds to react. This was not heroic in the simple way people imagine heroism. There was no open battlefield beneath his boots, no trench wall to press against, no tree line to run toward, no ground at all, only a thin skin of aircraft metal between the crew and the night. Only oxygen, intercom wires, fuel tanks, ammunition, hydraulics, and the constant knowledge that one enemy attack could turn the bomber into fire. Number 419 Squadron, Royal Canadian Air Force, carried its own identity into that war. Known as the Moose Squadron, it was part of the massive Allied bomber effort against German-occupied Europe. But squadron identity did not remove fear. A patch, a nickname, a squadron number, these things gave men belonging. They did not make them immortal. Every crew still had to climb into its aircraft. Every crew still had to lift into darkness. Every crew still had to trust men sitting in different parts of the same machine. That trust is important. A bomber crew was not just 7 men in one aircraft. It was a chain. If one man failed, others might die. If one man saw the fighter too late, the whole crew might burn. If one system failed, another man might have only seconds to react. The aircraft was a machine, but the crew was a living system inside it. Andrew Mynarski was part of that system. Pat Brophy was part of that system, one near the top of the aircraft, one at the rear.
Separated by metal, space, darkness, and duty. On a normal mission, each man stayed where the aircraft needed him. On the night over France, the aircraft would become abnormal in the worst way possible, and the distance between Mynarski and Brophy would become the distance between escape and sacrifice. Before the fire, Mynarski was not a legend. He was a Canadian airman doing a dangerous job in a dangerous war. That is what makes the story stronger, because legends can feel untouchable. But he was touchable, human, afraid if any sane man would be afraid, trained, but not protected from flame, brave, but not fireproof, a man who would soon have a way out in front of him, and a friend trapped behind him. The night of June 12 to 13, 1944, was not an ordinary night in Europe. Only days earlier, Allied troops had landed in Normandy. The battle for France had begun again on the ground, but the war in the sky did not stop. If anything, the air war became even more urgent. Armies on land needed roads, bridges, railways, fuel, ammunition, and reinforcements. That meant German movement had to be attacked, and railway yards became targets. Cambrai, France, was one of those targets, a railway yard, a place of movement, a place where the German war machine could be slowed, disrupted, and pressured. To planners, it was a target on a map. To bomber crews, it was a dangerous night flight over enemy-held territory. Mynarski's Lancaster was part of that mission. The aircraft belonged to No. 419 Squadron, Royal Canadian Air Force. The men boarded with their equipment, their training, and whatever private thoughts each man carried into the dark. A bomber crew did not need to speak every fear aloud. Some fears were understood without words. The fear of flak, the fear of night fighters, the fear of fire, the fear of being hit over enemy territory, the fear of surviving the aircraft only to land in a country still under occupation. The engines started. The aircraft moved. The Lancaster lifted into the night. Below it, England disappeared. Ahead lay the Channel, occupied France, German defenses, darkness, and the target. Inside the aircraft, each man became part of a routine built to hold fear in place. Check instruments, check guns, check navigation, check oxygen, listen for orders, watch the sky, wait for the German night defense system. The bombers were expected. They were not invisible. Radar stations, controllers, flak batteries, and night fighter crews were all part of the defensive web. The defenders did not know Andrew Mynarski. They did not know Pat Brophy. They did not know the families behind the names. They only knew bombers were coming, and bombers had to be stopped. That is the tragedy of industrial war. One side sees a target. The other side carries a crew. One side sees an aircraft. The other side carries sons, brothers, husbands, friends, and men who have learned to trust one another, because trust is one of the few things that still feels human inside a machine. As the Lancaster flew toward Cambrai, the crew was still part of the mission. A bomber in a stream, a Canadian aircraft among many Allied aircraft, a machine carrying danger toward the enemy. But every mission contained another possibility. The possibility that the aircraft would never return. The possibility that the target would not be the most important memory of the night. The possibility that the real story would begin after everything went wrong. That is what happened. The railway yard mattered. The mission mattered. The Allied war effort mattered. But for Andrew Mynarski and Pat Brophy, the night would be remembered not by the target on the ground, but by the fire in the aircraft and the choice made inside it. Somewhere over occupied France, the German night fighter found the Lancaster. The attack came from below and astern. That angle mattered. It was the blind, deadly place where a bomber could be hit before the crew fully understood the danger. One moment, the Lancaster was still flying. The next, the night erupted. Gunfire tore into the aircraft. Metal broke. Systems failed. Both port engines were knocked out, according to the official account. Fire spread near the section between the mid-upper and rear turrets, and flames broke out in the port wing fuel tanks. The aircraft became unstable, damaged, burning, dying. To the German night fighter crew, this was tactical success. The bomber had been found. The attack had landed. The aircraft was wounded in the dark. A heavy bomber that had crossed enemy sky was now burning over occupied territory. From outside, it was a kill in progress. From inside, it was the end of the world. Inside the aircraft, everything became urgent. The sound changed. The smell changed. The light changed. Engines no longer sounded like power. They sounded like failure. Smoke moved through the bomber. Flames began to take the space between men who had been connected only minutes before by intercom and duty. The Lancaster was no longer a bomber going to war. It was a burning corridor in the sky. A narrow metal body filled with trapped men, damaged systems, fuel, ammunition, and seconds disappearing too quickly. The pilot gave the order to abandon the aircraft. No long speech, no heroic ceremony, just the order every bomber crew feared and trained for. Get out. Now. For every man who could move, the order meant one thing. Leave the aircraft. Because of burning, Lancaster did not offer mercy to men who waited too long. The parachute was now the only chance. The night below, dangerous as it was, became safer than the fire inside. Mynarski left his turret. He began moving toward the escape hatch. He was doing what he was supposed to do. He was obeying the order. He was moving towards survival. And then he saw the rear turret. He saw Pat Brophy. The rear gunner was still there, trapped. That changed everything. The German attack had created the expected collapse. A bomber hit. Engines failed. Fire spreading. Crew abandoning. The machine dying. But inside that collapse, something happened the enemy could not calculate. One Canadian airman saw that another man could not escape, and suddenly, survival was no longer only a direction. It was a decision. The way out was close. The fire was growing. The aircraft was dying, and Andrew Mynarski turned back. At the rear of the Lancaster was one of the loneliest places in the aircraft, the rear turret, a small glass and metal world at the very back of the bomber. Cold, exposed, isolated, a place where a man sat facing the darkness, watching the night behind the aircraft for the fighter that might already be there. That was Pat Brophy's position. Rear gunner. The man at the end of the machine. The last watcher. The last warning. A rear gunner lived with his back to the crew and his eyes toward the danger behind them. He could be only a few meters from the rest of the men, but in combat, those few meters could feel like another world. When the German night fighter struck, that world became a prison. The aircraft was burning. The crew was ordered to abandon. Men who could move had to move. But Brophy could not simply climb out and follow them. The rear turret had become trapped. The exact mechanical failure should be stated carefully in the final, historical edit, but accounts describe the turret as jammed, with the normal systems needed for escape no longer working. Inside that turret, the war narrowed into almost nothing. Not the whole bombing campaign, not Germany, not Canada, not even the full aircraft, just the turret, the jammed mechanism, the fire coming closer, the knowledge that the crew has been told to leave, the knowledge that he cannot. That is the horror of this moment. Brophy is not refusing to leave. He is not choosing to stay. He is not frozen by cowardice. He is trapped. There is a difference, a terrible difference. A man can obey an order only if the aircraft lets him, and the Lancaster is no longer letting Brophy go. From outside, the German night fighter has already done its work. The bomber is damaged. The aircraft is burning. The crew is abandoning. But inside, the attack has created something more intimate than destruction. It has created separation. Some men can move. One man cannot. Some men have a hatch. One man has a turret. Some men have seconds to live if they act fast. One man has seconds passing while metal holds him in place. This is what Mynarski sees. He sees the rear turret. He sees Brophy. He sees that his friend is not coming. That is the moment the story stops being only about an aircraft shot down. It becomes about one man seeing another man trapped and refusing to let the fact pass through him as if it were nothing. Mynarski is close to the route out. He can still survive. The order to abandon has been given. No one can accuse a man of cowardice for escaping a burning bomber when ordered to do so. But Brophy is behind him, and in the rear of the aircraft, the trapped gunner becomes the reason everything changes. The German fighter has created the fire. The jammed turret has created the prison. But Mynarski's next choice will create the memory. The way out was still there. That is what must be remembered. Andrew Mynarski did not turn back because escape was already impossible. He did not turn back because there was nothing left to lose. He turned back while the hatch was still in front of him, while the night outside still offered a chance, while the parachute still mattered, while survival was still possible. That is what makes the choice so heavy. It was not made after safety had disappeared. It was made while safety was still near enough to reach. The aircraft was burning. The crew was abandoning. The German attack had done its work. The bomber was dying, and Andrew Mynarski turned away from his own chance to live. He moved back toward the rear of the aircraft, back toward Pat Brophy, back toward the trapped turret, back through the heat, the smoke, the broken metal, and the growing fire. The space between the mid-upper position and the rear turret was no longer simply part of an aircraft. It was a passage through flame. Every step mattered. Every second near the fire made survival less likely. The heat would have been violent. The smoke would have made breathing difficult. The noise of the damaged aircraft would have filled everything. Engines failing, metal groaning, wind tearing through openings, fire consuming whatever it could reach. This was not courage as a clean picture. It was not a statue. It was not a medal already shining on a uniform. It was a man in terror, choosing another man anyway. Mynarski was not fireproof. He was not untouched by fear. He was not made of legend. He was made of the same flesh that fire destroys. That is why the act matters. He reached Brophy, or close enough to try. Accounts describe Mynarski trying to free him from the rear turret, struggling against the jammed mechanism while flames moved around him. The exact physical details must be handled carefully, but the core is documented. Mynarski went back to help the trapped rear gunner. Brophy was still alive, still conscious, still trapped. He could see what Mynarski was doing. He could see the fire. He could see the danger, and he knew something Mynarski did not want to accept. The turret would not free him. The aircraft was too far gone. The rescue was failing. This is the cruelest part of the story. Heroism does not guarantee success. Love does not unlock metal. Loyalty does not stop fire. A man can do the bravest thing imaginable and still be defeated by machinery, flame, and time. Mynarski tried, but trying was not enough to free Brophy. And still, the attempt matters, because the moral weight of the moment is not measured only by whether the rescue succeeded. It is measured by what Mynarski was willing to risk when he believed his friend still needed him. He had a way out. He had a chance. He had permission to save himself, and he spent those seconds on another man. His clothing began to burn. His parachute began to burn. The very object meant to save him was being damaged by the fire he had entered for someone else. Every moment he stayed made the jump less survivable. Every moment he tried to help Brophy brought him closer to death. Brophy signaled that there was nothing more Mynarski could do. The exact gesture should be checked against official accounts, but the meaning was clear. Leave. Go. Save yourself if you still can. Imagine the pain in that moment. Not only physical pain, moral pain. The pain of realizing you cannot save the man you came back for. The pain of turning away, not because you want to, but because staying will not free him. The pain of leaving a friend inside a burning aircraft, while every instinct that brought you back tells you not to leave. That is the center of Andrew Mynarski's story. Not victory over fire, not rescue completed, not a perfect ending. A choice, a failed rescue attempt that became one of the clearest acts of loyalty in Canadian military history. The way out was in front of him. His friend was behind him, and he went back. There are moments when courage reaches the limit of what courage can do. This was one of them. Andrew Mynarski had gone back. He had entered the burning section of the aircraft. He had tried to free Pat Brophy, but the Lancaster was dying around them, and fire does not become merciful because a man is brave. The rear turret remained a prison. The mechanism would not give him back. The damage was too severe. The time was too short. The flames were too close. Mynarski could fight fear. He could fight his own instinct for survival. He could fight the order of every second telling him to leave, but he could not fight physics, not forever. This is where the story must be told, honestly. Mynarski did not save Brophy from the turret in that moment. He tried. He risked everything. He stayed as long as he could, but the fire and the metal won. That does not weaken the story. It makes it more human. Because real sacrifice does not always end with success. Sometimes it ends with an attempt no one should have had to make. Brophy understood this. From inside the turret, he could see Mynarski burning. He could see that the rescue attempt was costing him everything. He could see that if Mynarski stayed any longer, both men might die there before one of them even reached the hatch. So Brophy signaled him to go. Not because he wanted to be left, not because he did not understand what Mynarski had done, but because there was nothing more to do. The aircraft was still falling toward its end. The night outside was still waiting. The hatch was still somewhere ahead, but Mynarski was no longer the man who had first reached it. His clothing was burning. His parachute had caught fire. His body had already been terribly injured. The route to escape remained, but the cost of reaching it had changed. This is the worst condition proof of the story. Not enemy fire, not the attack itself, not even the crash. The worst condition was the moment after he had done the brave thing and discovered it was not enough. A man can choose correctly and still lose. A man can go back for his friend and still fail to free him. A man can become a hero in a moment that feels, to him, like failure. The German night fighter had created a burning aircraft, but the fire created the deeper tragedy. It forced Mynarski to leave the man he had tried to save. It forced Brophy to watch the friend who came back for him move away in flames. It turned the inside of the Lancaster into a place where survival and loyalty tore against each other. Mynarski turned back toward the hatch, not in triumph, not because the story was finished, not because Brophy was safe, but because Brophy had sent him away, and because one impossible choice had now become another. Could he still get out? Could he still jump? Could he still survive the fire he had entered for someone else? The aircraft was still alive, only in the way a dying machine can be alive, shaking, burning, falling, breaking. And Andrew Mynarski, already badly burned, moved toward the last opening left to him. Behind him was the friend he could not free. In front of him was the night. Andrew Mynarski reached the hatch again, but he was not the same man who had turned away from it moments earlier. The fire had marked him. His clothing was burning. His parachute had caught fire. His body had already paid for the attempt to save Pat Brophy. The escape route was still there. But now, even escape had become uncertain. Inside the rear turret, Brophy was still trapped, still alive, still watching. He had seen Mynarski come back through fire. He had seen him try. He had seen the flames take hold of the man who could have left, and now he saw him at the edge of the aircraft, preparing to jump into the night. This is the moment that survived in memory. Before he left the aircraft, Mynarski made a final gesture to Brophy. Many accounts describe it as a salute. That image must be handled carefully and respectfully, because it comes to us through testimony and remembrance. The exact wording around it should be checked against official records before final production, but the meaning is clear. It was a goodbye, not the kind men choose in peace, the kind forced out of them by fire, altitude, and seconds. There was no speech that could fix the moment, no words that could free Brophy, no promise that could make the aircraft safe, only a final sign from one airman to another. A sign that said, "I tried." A sign that said, "I saw you." A sign that said, "You were not abandoned without a fight." Then Mynarski jumped out of the burning Lancaster into the black sky over France, a man, leaving a dying aircraft with his clothing and parachute already burned by the fire he had entered for someone else. The night that offered escape now offered only uncertainty. Below him was occupied France. Above him was the burning bomber. Behind him was the friend he could not free. From the enemy's point of view, the Lancaster was finished. A bomber hit, a bomber burning, a bomber falling. The German fighter had done its work. But inside that destruction, something had happened. The enemy could never count in a victory report. A man had chosen loyalty over survival. And even though the rescue failed, the choice did not disappear. Mynarski reached the ground alive, but terribly burned. The fire had already done what fire does. It had followed him from the aircraft. It had turned his attempt to save another man into his own mortal wound. He would not survive those injuries. Brophy remained in the aircraft as it fell. The rear gunner Mynarski had tried to save was still trapped, still inside the turret, still inside a bomber coming down into occupied France. To anyone watching from outside, there would be almost no reason to believe he could live. The Lancaster was burning. The crash was coming. The man inside the rear turret seemed already lost, and yet the story was not finished. Because Pat Brophy, the man Andrew Mynarski thought he could not save, would survive to tell the world what happened in the fire. The Lancaster crashed in France, a burning aircraft broken by enemy fire, falling out of the night. For most crews, a crash like that meant silence, names added to a list, families notified, an aircraft lost, a mission recorded, a war moving on. But inside the wreckage, the impossible had happened. Pat Brophy survived. The rear gunner who had been trapped in the turret, the man Mynarski had gone back to save, lived through the crash. That survival is the reason this story exists, as more than rumor, more than a missing aircraft, more than one more bomber lost over Europe. Brophy's survival did not make the night less terrible. It did not undo Mynarski's burns. It did not bring back the aircraft. It did not erase the danger faced by the crew. But it gave the story a witness, and witness matters. Without Brophy, Andrew Mynarski's final act might never have been known. The world might have remembered only that he bailed out from a burning Lancaster and died from his injuries. the fire would have kept it secret. Brophy later told what had happened. He told of Mynarski seeing him trapped, of Mynarski coming back, of the attempt to free him, of the fire, of the final gesture before Mynarski left the aircraft. The story did not come from myth. It came from the man who had been trapped at the rear of the bomber. After the crash, Brophy survived in occupied France and eventually returned to Allied hands, with help connected to the French resistance. The exact route and details should be verified carefully before final narration. But the broad truth remains. The man Mynarski tried to save lived long enough to speak, and because he spoke, Mynarski's choice could not disappear into the darkness. Andrew Mynarski died from his burns on June 13, 1944. He was 27 years old, a Canadian airman from Winnipeg, a mid-upper gunner, a man who had a way out, a man who went back. In 1946, he was posthumously awarded the Victoria Cross. The medal did not make the act brave. The act was already brave. The medal made the nation look at it. It forced memory to pause at one burning aircraft over France and ask what kind of man turns away from escape when his friend is trapped behind him. The German night fighter destroyed the bomber. It killed Mynarski. It nearly took Brophy, but it did not destroy the meaning of what happened inside the aircraft. That meaning survived because Brophy survived. The trapped man lived, the witness returned, and the story of the Canadian who went back into the flames became part of Canada's memory of the air war. Returned to the hatch, returned to the fire, returned to the last seconds inside the Lancaster. The way out was in front of him. His friend was behind him, and Andrew Mynarski went back. That is why this story endures. Not because he destroyed the enemy, not because he won a battle alone, not because he escaped the fire untouched. He did not. It endures because in a war of machines, targets, raids, and casualty lists, one human decision still rises above the noise. He saw a friend trapped. He had a chance to live, and he used part of that chance trying to save another man. Mynarski was not fearless. Fear is what makes the choice matter. A man who feels no fear does not sacrifice it. A man who knows the fire can kill him and goes back anyway, gives something real, something no enemy can measure, something no report can fully contain. The rescue failed in the moment. Brophy was not freed by Mynarski's hands, but Brophy survived. And because Brophy survived, the world learned that inside a burning bomber, one Canadian airman had refused to leave him without trying. That is the deeper rescue, not of the body from the turret, but of the truth from the fire. Andrew Mynarski is remembered not for the fire he escaped. He is remembered for the fire he entered, not for the life he saved with certainty, but for the friend he refused to abandon.